Well, here we are again. I am so excited. The last call for our interview series of August. We're going to be starting them again in September. And today on August 31st, Jeannie. Hello, good to see you from, where are you? Saskatchewan, I think.
Yes, yes. Small town, Mossbank, Saskatchewan.
Moss Bank. Moss Bank?
Yeah, we're about an hour and a bit south of Regina, so pretty
Okay.
close to the U.S. border.
Okay, so our listeners in the US could get a feel for where we are because Winnipeg is kind of similar. We're just hugging that, US border, waiting for it to open so we can flow across the border again like we used to. And I know it's going to happen, but so I am so excited for our talk today because one of my favorite things is reading books. And I've had a dream, as you know, and many others I've been saying for about 3 years, of writing my own book. And so I'm at the stage where I'm ready to start really putting my heads down. We're heading into that season, I think, of writing. And so I want to find out, first of all, I want to tell the audience a little bit about you. And Jeannie is someone I've known now for several years through the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. And Jeannie is a co-publisher and senior editor at Wood Dragon Books, which I love that name, which is really a niche hybrid kind of publishing company, right? And you're in Western Canada, which is really wonderful, as all of our speakers coming up for the event in September are from Western Canada, and many of our attendees. So there's that really prairie grassroots connection there. And you yourself have authored a dozen books.
Yeah.
You have lots of stories that you've told, and I'm sure many more. And I want to find out about you in terms of what started this all. Like, how did you get into book publishing? And I'm so curious to hear about that story. So please go ahead.
Well, it started in 1998 when I was working on my very first book, which was called Lies and Fairy Tales That Deny Women Happiness. It was a gender nonfiction book talking about women's issues. And that book since has been republished as Tossing the Tiara, Keys to Creating Powerful Women Leaders. And as I was working on this book and I was thinking about why am I doing this book? How am I going to get this book out in the world? And I realized the reality of the traditional publishing industry. And the traditional publishing industry is one where you find an agent. There's very few publishing houses that don't work specifically with agents. Find an agent who will represent your book, and then the agent represents your book to different publishing houses who may or may not take your book. And then unless you're extremely well known or have an incredible track record already in the publishing field, you will get what they call an advance. An advance means it's an advance against royalties in the future. And royalties advances are somewhere between $1,000 and maybe $10,000, and for most authors. And most authors do not work out their advance, meaning their books never sell enough for their little portion of the royalty, which is usually 6 to 8% of the book price, to pay back that $1,000 to $10,000. And so that's when I started to really look at what are the pros and cons between traditional publishing and self-publishing, which is what I self-published my first dozen books. And not only do you lose control over when that book is going to finally see the light of day, not only that, you lose control over the cover, design, title, internal editing, release dates, how it's marketed, how many books are produced, is it coming out in hardcover, softcover, ebook, audiobook. All of those decisions are out of your hands with a traditional publisher. And so through self-publishing my books, as during these last 28 years, I've been a speaker, trainer, researcher, professional speaker on issues around gender, racism, and leadership. I have been writing books to accompany my practice. So I have several books on leadership, several books on gender, several books on diversity, inclusion, racism, etc. And they were nonfiction books to support my practice. And that's where a lot of people that might be coming to the event are looking at that as well, as is how will a book increase my credibility, help me form my thoughts better, represent my brand, and be a revenue stream. So a lot of people who are coaches, entrepreneurs, business people look to a book to do exactly what I looked to my 12 books to do.
Mhm.
And that is to support my practice. And so then during this time, as you know, through Association of Professional Speakers, through CAPS, I have presented all across Canada and down into the States at different chapters on how do you take this idea out of your head and end up with the finished product. And so I've done a lot of coaching on how to be a professional speaker, a coach, a trainer, a business person. How do you take all of the stuff that's in your head and that you have bits and pieces of paper on and convert that into a book that is marketable? And so along this way, I've been coaching a lot of people. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I started publishing my husband's books, and he writes on financial astrology, the markets and math. And he also does coaching and delivers training events on how to start a small batch craft distilleries. So he teaches all over, teaches with distilleries all over the world, and runs these half-day sessions. 1-week sessions. And so he wanted to have a book that accompanied that training event. And so as I started working with what he wanted to do with his books, that's when Wood Dragon Books came to be, because we didn't want to be publishing his books under my speaking brand, right? Mm-hmm. And then from that, in the last 2 years, we're on track to publish 15 other books, about half nonfiction, about half fiction, from other people. And so Wood Dragon has now become its own entity where I'm not at the front of the room speaking, and I'm not writing, I'm editing, publishing, producing, marketing, and getting other people's books into those Amazon top seller slots instead of my own.
Wow. There's so much there. We could do, I think, an hour call on this, if not more. I love what you said about so many things. About a book provides credibility to people who are coaches, trainers, facilitators, speakers, or anyone really that is in the service of others. So and even if they are selling a tangible product like your husband's, which is teaching around the around the wine, around
distilling, craft distilling.
So it's a technique and everything. It provides people with that credibility in the marketplace, that differentiation, if you will. But one other thing that comes to mind, because I know you and I've seen your books and I've read your books, is your own books and the books, because you shared a few books that you are working, including your husband's, that you're working to support others with, also have this element of unique personal stories, uniqueness about the author. So it's not like I know everything there is to know about this topic and let me tell you. It's about here's what I know about this topic and how it fits into my world and my life. And I think that's an art in being able to write a book and having someone like you support people in writing a book that comes from a very deep, authentic place. Am I on the right path with, where we can add or weave our own stories and our own experiences into a nonfiction book? So it's like there's stories in there. It's a little of both. Is that?
I think in a sense, it's when you're writing a nonfiction book, it's important to have an intention of contribution and have an expectation of revenue. So you expect
let's repeat that. Intention
of contribution. So this book is to educate, inspire, or entertain your reader in some form,
or
whatever.
Could be a couple.
Yes. It's usually all, actually. And even when you think about entertainment, when you're reading a book and there's a metaphor in there, or there's a story, like you said, from your life, that while you're in that story and that metaphor, it's entertaining. Right. And then the metaphor itself, though, educates. Right. And the book itself should inspire people to take different action in their business, in their life, and in some other part of their life or business. So there has to be an element of inspiration. There has to be an element of entertainment. Those don't have to be the majority of the book, although we know that there are books that are primarily inspiration. So most nonfiction books, the load is on the education side, with a splash of entertainment and a dollop of inspiration. And so in the sense that it's important to, even when you start writing your book, is to figure out what is that blend. Because some books are much more academic. They are very much the sage from the stage. We use that phrase, speakers and trainers, instead of pulling your own experience out. So here's this information. How did it affect me? How did I use it? How can you use it? How can I inspire you to use it? So it's that magic combination when we talk about nonfiction books, particularly when they're books to support your craft or your business as it exists. So it's, I think your stories that you use have to be true. If you're, there's the famous story about the Harvard goal setting thing where everyone wrote their goals down and they surpassed everyone else. That's never happened. That's
Really?
That's a false story. And so many people have published about it because no one has gone back. And if you're going to say something, if it is not your experience, go and research it till you can prove that it's true.
Right.
If it's a statistic or something you're saying, be very sure that, because once it's in print, it's in print. Yeah. And when you're speaking in the front of a room or in a circle of training attendees, it's one thing to say things it disappears into the air. Yeah. But when you put something in a book, it's important that you go and double check every story you're telling, unless they are your lived experience. Unless you're talking about, here's my experience working with this client. Right. Otherwise, yeah. So that balance of stories and metaphors and statistics and examples, not only do you need to educate, inspire, and what was the third thing I said? Entertain. Thank you. Yeah. You need to always be looking at what is your balance between metaphor, between your own stories, between statistical examples, and to ask yourself where those come from, and if it's not my experience, how do I prove that is true?
Yeah. And one thing that I look for in books like nonfiction is all of those. And I really love when there's a mentoring piece in it, like you referred to, is here's what I did, and here's that it worked for me or it didn't work for me. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it because it worked for that person or didn't. It's just that, I hadn't thought of those consequences, if you will, or I hadn't thought that might interfere with my plan. So I love the mentoring piece from the writer's point of view, from their own experience, especially in business. So I love that that's what you're doing. I feel that's one of the really important pieces there's so many books out there as well. So I'm becoming more careful about selecting books. So I love that, can't even replay them now, but maybe that's something we can ask you to do. And of course, you are going to be speaking about many of these things in your talk September 19th during Expand Your Influence. But I know that in your talk, you're going to be talking about the 5 secrets, I love that word, that profitable nonfiction authors know that others don't. So if there was one of those that you could share and maybe expand a little bit on, of course, everyone coming to the event is going to get all 5. What kind of comes to the surface for you that you would love the listeners to have as maybe a starting point? Because many of our audience may be at that place of never having written a book. And I think that's almost the most painful place. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but once you get a book done, it's just like, whew, and you can reflect on the learnings and do things differently. But when you're at the beginning, you go, I don't know if it's going to work. So can you share one thing?
I think there's 2 things I'd like to talk about in context to editing. I was just working with, we've got 7 nonfiction books that we are just contracting with authors right now. So they're just working on their manuscripts. And this one author said, well, I keep going back to the introduction and I've worked on it. I says, why are you keep working on the introduction? Write your introduction, if that's where you're starting with the book, edit it once, and then put it away. and get working on chapter 2 and chapter 1, 2, etc. A lot of authors think that each chapter has to be perfect before they go on to the next one. And that is the number one reason that writers get writer's block. Oh, wow. Is because they're unwilling to just say, okay, it's good enough for now, I'm moving onward. Sometimes we use that as an author, because having written so many books, I can see where I got stuck and when I didn't get stuck. And that's the one thing that I consistently see authors who can't seem to move forward is they just will not get off their introduction. And that's very important. And the second thing with editing is to understand what editing really is. Mm-hmm. So when I first work with an author, we work on the first couple rounds of developmental editing. So that is, does the core metaphor of the book hold up? Does the core content in the book, is there pieces missing? Are the chapters kind of in the right place? Is it threaded through enough with what that main metaphor is or the main theme of the book? That's called developmental editing. And so sometimes that's really about these 2 pages, they got to go somewhere else. They don't live here. And then you get into copy editing and line editing, which is really about, are the chapters in the right place? Not are the chapters in the right place, but are the paragraphs in the chapters in the right place? And then are the sentences in the paragraph in the right place before you get into things like misplaced modifiers, punctuation, grammar, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then it goes into galley, and then we do proofreading. A lot of authors write their book, they think they got it edited because they got it proofread for errors and punctuation. Right. And there is no good book that exists. I don't know, maybe Hemingway, I don't know. Yeah. But I haven't worked with any author who hasn't had to go at least through 3 or 4 edits minimally to get that book into a place where it's meaningful, marketable, and readable. Yeah. And in today's world, where most of us have our books in several different platforms, all of the books that I work with now, we eventually put them up on Amazon. We never put them up on Amazon the first thing. That's one of the secrets, and why, I'll tell you, in our and because then anyone can have a preview. They can read those first couple chapters of your book. And if your book is not well written, they're not going to buy it. It used to be that we bought books with the title and the cover and the bleep and what's on the back. And then we got into it and it's not really well written. I'm not really getting this book. But we don't have the luxury of that anymore because there is pre-read. And with that pre-read, it's not, the first 50 pages of your book has to be pretty damn good. Yeah. And that only comes with editing that is not done by you, the author. You do the rewrites. Or if you have a family member who is an English teacher, unless they are also an editor, it's a specific skill set. And that's why we have a team of people who do it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to take editing seriously because that's what's going to make or break your book when it comes to true sales.
Oh, I love this. So 2 things, everyone listening, those of you wanting to do your book, don't get stuck on your intro. Move on to the next chapter. And it's good enough once you get it done, and you can always come back and change it. And number 2, really in a nutshell, take editing seriously. The book is in print. It's, it's there forever in a sense, and you want to do it right. So I am so looking forward to hearing more about your talk. I've heard your talks many times. Every time I hear you speak, Jeannie, I learn something new. I feel also more grounded when I hear your talk. The way you deliver the very complex world of writing and publishing and marketing a book, you do it in such a simplistic, easy to understand way. So I just want to say for those of our listeners, and I know some people have popped on and offered some comments, which I'll reply to, you're going to be going through this in more finer detail. And of course, people are going to be able to connect with you even more after. So Expand your influence, everyone. Jeanne is one of our amazing expert speakers. So if you haven't registered yet, please do. We'll put the link below this video. And so one thing, Jeanne, is how can people connect with you? What's, in terms of the technology? I know they can always find you here in the Expand Your Influence Facebook group. If they wanted to reach out and see more about what you do, what would be the best place?
Probably the website's the best, Wood Dragon Books. I think you can read it under my name there. www.wood, W-O-O-D, dragon, like the beast, books.com. Okay,
good. One day I want to hear about that title, that your company title, because it is one of those titles, and that's another thing you're a master at, is helping people get, you have a whole system around creating a title that draws people in and says, I like it. It's tell me more. And that's part of the secrets, right? So I am so excited. Thank you so much, Jeanne. And thank you everyone for watching today. Next week, we'll have another interview. So join us again. Bye for now.